don't be afraid to fail.
Mm.
Just be afraid that you might not do anything in your life.
Bhati Santush, on this journey that you have traveled, I'm sure you've failed in certain things.
We have failed
Yeah.
a lot of things.
Yes.
But what happens is, just because you are afraid to fail, don't stop doing things. Anybody entering any business, don't just look at the business from the surface of it.
What sort of things do you clash for, and how do you resolve this?
So it's a very simple thing. See, how we have kept this going for the last 26 years is, we have a common objective.
What advice could you give to someone like that?
Okay, my first advice would be, everybody is not a good entrepreneur, nor is everybody a good employee.
Welcome to another episode of Talk with Jay by UDAWWA. As we mentioned many times, we are in the journey of finding people who's made a change to the world. We've been in the process of finding those people that thought outside the box, took some risks, and sort of gave an attempt to what most thought that couldn't be done. And out of Sri Lanka, we are meeting one of the top examples of what we're describing, which is none other than Jayakody from Bathiya Santush Group.
Hi Dulip, how are you?
Very good, thank you. It's an absolute pleasure
Thank you very
to
much
have
for
you
having
with
me
Talk
here
to
today.
Jay. Thank you for coming
Thank you.
to our studios. And now I would like to ask you what you're doing at the moment in Melbourne.
Well, we have come here for a very, very extravagant and a special show. We're having it at the Crown, at the Palms, and it's going to be a very, very special event for us, because, and also for the Sri Lankan, the Sri Lankan community here, because for the first time there's a Sri Lankan show happening at the Palms, at the Crown. So it's a great feeling to be here, because I first came here in 2001, and we had our first show at the Clayton Town Hall, which is a small little place, and it was a small show. And then I think Sri Lankan shows had not really come to where it is now. But over a span of about 24 years, we have kept
Improving.
we have kept improving and expanding this whole experience. And now we had a big show in 2023, and where we had a massive hall, like a stadium show, and then now we're having a very special show at the Crown for the first time.
Yes, and I happened to be there yesterday, and it was a pleasure to see images of Sri Lankan artists displayed in
At the Crown.
multiple places of the Crown. Yeah, which
Thank you.
is something very unique to see. Very
And
refreshing.
also the main theme is in Sinhala as well.
Yes.
On that poster.
Madagascar.
So there were so many people who called me and said, "Ado, kohomari kalla Crown එකේ Sinhala poster එකකුත්
ගැහුවා."
එහෙම නෙවෙයි. ඒ concept එකේ නම. So the way I told him was that the name was in Sinhala, but everything else is in English, so that everybody can read it.
Yes. Fantastic. Thank you so much for India. I know it's a busy schedule for you. Thank you very much for coming in. So as we mentioned, this program is about finding the revolutionists of the world, which is those who've taken these risks, and those who've done something differently, and those who've thought outside the box, those when the society told them that they can't do something, that itself was a motivator for some of these people that we are meeting. You are clearly one of the typical examples of this, and probably one of the best examples to come out of Sri Lanka.
It's not me only, it's Bathiya and Santush, so including Santush. So everything I say here,
Yes.
I say for the two of us, I guess.
Yes. So, and these are two minds working together who probably thought very similarly at the time. And but as you mentioned just about this partnership, because which I was going to come to. Now, this partnership that you have with him, and how important it is for someone who's starting a new venture like this to select the right partner, and what qualities do they need to look for in your opinion?
Okay, so sometimes people might think that you don't need partners because you've got, you've got an entrepreneur who say one entrepreneur who has done big in the world as well, but then most of those stories have partners.
Yes.
It's only that after some time the partners get faded away, and that one main man just comes up. So even if you take Apple, it was Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Yes, of course, it was Steve Jobs who had the idea and the thing that to sell, but then it was Steve Wozniak who created the entire ecosystem, as in the hardware and the ecosystem. So everything like Facebook to most of these places, if you take a business, it's either the main entrepreneur, but there is a team always. So in our case, it was the two of us. And the most important thing of this is because you get two perspectives.
Yeah.
You see the same problem in very, very different angles, which is a good thing, because that way, when it comes to a risk, you could assess the risk much better
Mm.
than being an individual and doing it so that you're only seeing it in one perspective. So that really helps any sort of brand new thing, a new venture that you're going to be a part of.
Yeah, the Steve Jobs example was a classic one, and as you mentioned, and also Bill Allen and Bill Gates convinced Microsoft.
So most of those people had partners, but
yes.
then some of them are not partners, but people who worked with them. But
Yeah.
then it's a partnership at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's not just an employee.
Yes.
The first lot of your, say the first lot of your employees are also your partners, because it's a small business.
Yes.
And in that small business, everybody takes risks together.
Yes.
And partnership is very important.
But I mean, today's world, it's very evident that you see thousands, hundreds of these partnerships beginning, but then they don't last. They're somewhere down the track that they fall off, and from Paul Allen and Bill Gates concept, where they started Microsoft, they're going well. They started the company off well, and they've really gone nuts. And Sangha and Mahela at the time when they were playing cricket also, it was such a good combination and a partnership to see on the field. Bati Santosh, my memory tells me it was 1998. And since that time, knowing the two of you very well, there would have been hundreds and thousands of clashes among the two of you inside, right? Opinion clashes, not personal clashes, but more about what you shouldn't do and how you should do something about it.
We still have those.
You still have this. I'm sure we'll witness some during this tour as well. But it's you've kept it tight. Not only that, and you've gone this distance, and you've shown a lot of people how it should be done. Without going into the deep ends of it, but can you tell us what sort of things do you clash for, and how do you resolve this?
So it's a very simple thing. See, how we have kept this going for the last 26 years is we have a common objective. We know where we want to go, and we know that we know where we want to go, and we know exactly where we are. So sometimes you need to know that the path that each individual would take sometimes would be a different path. So when we go to create a common thing, a song maybe, sometimes we take each other's opinions, but we argue on it very hard. And certain days it's quite it's quite aggressive and quite fiery as well inside the studio or office. But at the end of the day, we both have come from a very corporate kind of background, because we both worked in corporate. So we keep it very professional. So when a certain creative argument or a constructive argument comes to a certain point, most of these arguments in other cases, what happens is you cross a certain line. The moment you cross that certain line and you become personal, this just keeps going back and back and back towards history, and then you pull out unnecessary things, and after some time you lose focus on the problem that you're arguing about, or you're constructively trying to solve. Then you're in a personal space where you're like, you did this to me yesterday, you did this to me 3 months ago. This even happens with husbands and wives.
Yep.
So, and then you just pull out like unnecessary things which are in the past. So we don't do that. We are just like a corporate. So when we have these kind of very, very, very hardcore, very hardcore opinionated differences, we pause at one point. We take a break, we go outside, have a coffee, come back and again start arguing.
Yeah.
Because that way you can keep it focused on the problem at hand. And this is something that has kept our brand going. And this is something that has kept the brand focused.
Mm.
It's very focused.
Yep.
And this has also really put us on track when we are a bit off track.
Yep.
So this is how we have kept the partnership going. So it's a very objective partnership.
Yep.
Most of the time, I don't think we even see the same thing, very similarly.
Mm.
If I say it's black, he'll say it's white. But then we somehow manage to bring a very
Gray.
soulful gray
Yeah.
to the picture.
You did. I'm sure you're going to, because you mentioned this about husbands and wives, and do you apply the same theory to your personal life and your?
Of course, yes, because see, when you live or when you work with somebody, you need to know that it's just two people. So it's always your life, my life, and our life.
Mm.
There's no just our life in the picture.
Yeah.
It's always going to be you, me, and us.
Mm.
So you need to know that there are three spaces, even at office or at home. Everybody has their own individual space. Then you have a common space. So if you don't respect that, that's when a lot of problems starting and a lot of things start falling apart.
Mm. Well, thank you for that very comprehensive answer. I think that's very useful for a lot of us out here. It's just that a lot of people that we are encouraging to get into entrepreneurship and starting up their own venture, following their passion, failure is what worries them, right? I want to hear it from the horse's mouth. Bhati Santush, on this journey that you have traveled, I'm sure you've failed in certain things.
We have failed
Yeah.
a lot of things.
Yes.
But what happens is, just because you are afraid to fail, don't stop doing things, because you can basically cover up your failures if you have even if you have a lot of failures, if you have a lot of successes, the failures will get covered. So you need to do about 100 things, 30 may succeed, and about 70 may fail, but that 30 is enough to make you a successful person.
Mm.
So that's what has happened to us, because when we started this journey, we have had a lot of ups and downs.
Mhm.
So as you know, BNS, apart from the songs, we also have we also have our audio studios, we have our event company, we have our agency, we have a lot of businesses.
Mhm.
We are a group of companies, and we have about 12 companies in our hand at the moment. And these companies have also gone through ups and downs. But the only thing is that failure is a part. I think everybody says this. So failure is a part of your journey,
Mm.
and failure really makes you a tough nut.
Yes.
Every time you go and crash, and when you get your bum dragged on on gravel,
Yeah.
your bum becomes harder. Right? And you become a tough nut. So what happens is, every time you come out of it, you start seeing the world very differently,
Mm.
and you start seeing a lot of other perspectives.
Mm.
So if you don't fail, and if you're constantly successful,
Mm.
I'll give you an example. It's like a son or a daughter of a rich child who hasn't been exposed to this world,
Mm.
who has been cushioned all their life. Try throwing them out into the real world and see what happens.
Yes.
So you don't build that whole street smartness, and you don't build that kind of endurance.
Mm.
Then you don't build that kind of stamina
Mm.
to go through a very tough journey.
Yes.
So when you don't have those qualities,
Mm.
I don't think you can be a good leader,
Yes.
because leaders have to know how to endure,
Mm.
all those things I told you
Mm.
first. So don't be afraid to fail.
Mm.
Just be afraid that you might not do anything in your life.
I'm gonna bring
Right?
up.
Be afraid of that.
Yeah.
If you're not doing anything with your life, that's something to be really afraid of. Right?
Yes.
But if you do something with your life, and if you fail, you have done something, so
Yeah.
you can be happy about it. Right? So be afraid if you don't do anything.
And I totally agree. I think, would you agree if you say that if you get out and do something, you're more likely to be criticized rather than if you were just.
Obviously, because see, why would people criticize you if you haven't done anything?
Yes.
You're just irrelevant.
Mm.
So it's always the person who does it who gets criticized, and the person who comes to solve a problem who gets blamed.
Mm.
But that person is also the reason that things get solved,
Yeah.
things happen, and the world moves forward.
Yes.
So be that person than playing in the safe zone,
Yes.
because most of the people in this world, they don't
Mm.
like to basically say their opinion.
Mm.
Why? Because they think that they might get criticized. Most of the people don't like to take risks because they think they'll fail.
Mm.
Most of the people don't like to do a lot of things because they don't want to face the failure.
Yes.
But also, you say that if you don't do it, how can you be successful?
Yes.
So it's hand in hand.
So, thanks for that very informative answer that you gave us. So, in terms of, people are worried about failure. People are worried about having to come back from a failure. People are worried about being challenged and not being able to recover from such a situation. So, in your view, can you give our viewers something about, where you thought, okay, this is a challenge, this is a failure, but how did you maneuver yourselves again to come back out of it?
So it's like this. See, when we started, we were heavily criticized, as in papers, everything. They were saying that this kind of new thinking or the new music is not suited to our country, and there's a lot of cultural backlashes in that. But only thing is that now, if we had to face that music, a young person now has a triple or a quadruple size of that because of Facebook and Instagram and social media.
Yeah.
Because those days you could opt to read it or not,
Mm.
you could opt to see it or not. But today it's in your hand and it's constantly hitting you.
Yes.
So what you need to develop is, you need to develop the skill of, how can I put it? This might go in a very spiritual path as well, but I'm not talking about it in a spiritual path. I'm talking about it in a very, very practical, a general day to day thing. You need to be in a space where you are not happy, nor are you angry, nor are you sad.
Mm.
See, from the first day, both of us, as in Bhathiya and Santosh, our thing was, if we uh, if we go to a concert and we get good feedback from people, we are happy for the moment, and we would, like, say, if somebody comes and says, wow, your show was so good, we saw this, saw this for the third time or the second time, and you do this at this place very nicely, say you sang this song extremely nicely today and all that. Yes, we are happy and we see a lot of people cheering, but the moment we walk off the stage, we are off. And then I start analyzing, or he also starts analyzing, myself and Santosh both. Okay, what did we do right today? How can we improve that?
Mm.
Same way, if we read an article in the paper and say and see somebody is like attacking us with certain thing, we would break it down and see, is this an objective kind of criticism? If it's objective, we start working on it. If it's not objective, that's his opinion. He's entitled to it. That's it. Right. So if you take us from day one, now say for example, I think our work relationship with who Nelar
And
Kasim
Yep.
is a very good example. He was a guy who used to criticize us and write a lot about our songs and how our
Lyrics.
lyrics are not up to the mark at the start. So what we did was we invited him to do a song with us. So he was also shocked. So we started with Unmadani and we ended up with a whole load of hits like Kirikudu Chandani Pala Pedu Pedum Gumna De Itana Amrata up to this latest Unmad Prema Gia. So we have been doing a lot of work with him. So it's a very good example. So the thing is, see, you need to be in a blank kind of a state when it comes to your emotions when dealing with opinions. If you don't do that, you can easily get carried away. You can easily derail or defocus from where you want to go. This is one advice that I would like to give anybody. And also, at any given time, don't bask in your glory and think that, oh, I am the man. A lot of people try to do that. And also, when you're dealing with your customer or your fan, show them only the things which really they need to see. They don't need to see what sort of car you drive. They don't need to see what sort of thing you do. You can inspire people by showing it in a practical sense, but you don't need to take things and rub it in their face, because that shows that you're basking in your own glory. That should not be the case, right? You should keep it very objective, and that way you can navigate certain things. But saying that, even we have had places where we have, gone off track a little bit, because we are all humans. And of course we get emotional. Though I say this, it's a journey. It's not something that I've achieved completely. So there have been certain times when you're like emotionally really wowed. Sometimes we've gone on track, but we've come back and we've tried to correct ourselves and move, keep moving forward.
You've certainly changed the perception of a generation that was much senior to you guys. That was heavily critical at the start when you launched your music, which is something that was quite unique. I think not many people were able to do that. Is there any specific tips that you can give to people out there?
I think the answer was in my previous answer, because when you can defocus on things that are not objective, and when you can keep going, after some time you're able to change the entire system. So now these days a lot of people are talking about Sri Lanka having to go through a system change. They're talking system change, but most of them, what they don't realize is, I feel that for any system change, there are 4 steps, in my opinion. And this I take off, the example I take is a termite. A termite is a very good example to show anybody how system change can be done. Okay, so a termite will go into a block of wood, right? You wouldn't see the termite going. You won't even know the termite is there. But after some time, you suddenly keep your hand on that piece of wood, and that piece of wood goes in. And when it breaks apart, the entire system inside that has changed. The entire DNA of it has changed. But the piece of wood just still remains like that. Only if you go and, press it, or if you go and try to, keep weight on it or whatever, you will realize that it's gone through this change. How? Because the termite does a very, 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 very sharp and intelligent thing. What it does is, it will first, as we say, now you have an existing system, you have to go and infiltrate the system. So you don't enter, you have to infiltrate. What I mean by infiltrate is, you need to go in disguise and get into that first. Because if not, you can't change an existing, if it may be a corrupt system, it may be a good system, whatever, you have to infiltrate the system, and you need to become one with the system. Then what do? You start disintegrating the system, right? So infiltration, disintegration. While disintegrating, you integrate what you disintegrate. You don't disintegrate the entire system and then a system collapses. Then you keep disintegrating and reintegrating it, disintegrating and reintegrating, disintegrating and reintegrating. What happens? Without you knowing, the entire system changes and the structure doesn't collapse. You get my point?
Absolutely.
So this is what we did to our industry. So when we came to our industry, the industry was set in a certain way. I'll tell you this, the smallest thing. Okay, keep aside the songs. Every artist used to answer phone calls and say, okay, I am free on this date. I'll take this booking, all this. So we brought in the culture of having a manager. These things happen in Australia and other countries, but it was not happening in Sri Lanka. When we brought in the culture of having a manager, my goodness, you should have seen the reaction of these organizers. you think that you're
It's
above
yours.
everything, and do you think you're so big to have a manager and all that? So we said, no, it's just, so we had an excuse. We said, no, we are just two people, so it's very difficult to coordinate between us. So this guy manages our calendar. That's how we started this. So then people got used to having managers, and now the entire system is going on that. Then we suddenly realized that artists were technically undercharging, right? So say a concert organizer organizes a concert, and the artist doesn't know the equation of this. He doesn't understand the business model of his own industry. So the artist will do a wrong calculation, or he might not understand the business, and he undercharges. So we started understanding the business model. Creative is there, but where do we go and sell the creative? When we sell the creative, we started understanding every business model: TV, radio, concerts, advertising. We started understanding the spaces, and we gave it an appropriate pricing from our end. The moment we brought that in, that's when you heard back in the day, oh my God, these guys are overcharging. These no, but then that became a norm. So today I'm very proud to say a general new entry with a hit can charge about 4 times what a older artist back in the day charged. A artist in it, he saw her peak. So that gave the industry a good space so that people can start to come and do this full time. Then we wanted to bring in a corporate structure to this. Why? Because we saw a certain gap in the industry. Say, for example, back in the day, like in the 80s, if you wanted to get a phone in Sri Lanka, you had to wait for 6 months, right? SLT was the only company which was there. If you wanted to go and transfer some cash from a bank or whatever, you'll have to go and stand in queue. So the banking industry, the telecommunication industry was not an industry. It was just another thing which was happening. But then when we started in 98, there were ATMs everywhere. There were like 2 or 3 telephone companies. You could get a phone over the counter, and it was systematic, well streamed. And where were we? This industry was all over the place. So we wanted to bring it to a corporate platform. So we started a company, right? And when we started that company also, people didn't understand what we were doing. So we brought in a platform. We first started a studio, right? We started a studio, and then that studio, we named it BNS Studio. But then what happened was we started realizing after some time that we were doing about 4 to 5 productions. Then when we went back and again broke it down, and when we started to analyze it, then we realized, oh, okay, yes. So it's BNS Studio. So people come to get BNS stuff done. And then, of course, it will be 4 to 5 jobs a month. But then, is the studio really BNS? Or is it like a flow where things are done? Like, say, if you have a big clothing factory, yes, brands are made. Like, if you take a particular factory, so many brands will be made in that. What we did was we removed the label BNS from the studio and made it Sarigam Music. And the studio suddenly became full, and we went from 1 studio to 2 studios to 3 studios to 4 studios. Just like that, we started our own film company. We started our own event company. So these were to do our work for us. But then what happened was, after some time, because we structured it so well, those companies started doing other work. So even today, most of our companies, we service massive companies like Unilever, to Fonterra, to Dialogue, to Singer, to so many big corporates. And also sometimes we service the Sri Lankan government also as a company. So we managed to build all these entities from ground up because of that thinking. So this is how we managed to, I won't say that we did the entire thing, but this is how we managed to spark that entire, that entire system change in our industry.
Yeah.
And that, again, I'm going back, we had to do it like the termite. Because if you come and start, clashing your heads with the existing system, you will have resistance. If you want to smoothly do a system change as I said, infiltrate. Sorry, I couldn't say these things. You have to infiltrate. Then you need to integrate, disintegrate, and reintegrate. So you need to, I'll just say this one. So first you need to infiltrate, you need to integrate, then you need to disintegrate, and you need to reintegrate.
They're the 4 steps.
So according to me, this is the 4 steps that you can do a change to a system which is supporting something, and that thing should not collapse, but you need to do a change from within. Yeah. This is the way that I see that this could be done, because this is the way that we approached it. You haven't seen us clash with any sort of senior old school musician. They said a lot of things to us, but we never said anything to them. We said, okay, you're senior, you're entitled to your opinion, but let's try this as well. So when you keep doing it,
they're convinced.
The reality,
yes,
and then they are convinced.
They're convinced. Yeah, I think we're talking about, we are approaching a lot of new entrepreneurs with our program here, and we're trying to get to them. But I see, like, we've seen you guys, especially at a young age, getting into a lot of international music awards and winning them in the Asian concept, and a lot of your products are very well recognized much earlier when you were at a younger age as well. But we're seeing a generation where you come up with a hit or two, then you got a massive Instagram following or YouTube following for that matter. Then all of a sudden they fall off the radar. They're no longer producing that sort of good stuff that they did. Why do you think this happens? Is there a handy tip that you can give to people out there why this happens to people?
That's because, see, okay, so what you're asking is a question of longevity.
Absolutely.
Right? So when you talk about longevity happens when you have a clear
vision,
and when you have a clear place that you need to go. If not, you don't get longevity in anything. Because, see, when you don't have a vision of what you want to do, like if you take from our generation, people who are still around, if you take BNS, if you take Jayashri, if you take Centigrades, and people who are still in the business of doing music and only music and doing stuff, all these guys had a clear vision. Now, even during our time, there were many other bands. Like, I'm just talking about, if you say Chinti, Raj, they are also still around, and so many people like that. But I'm talking about many other bands who you don't hear. So this is there in any trade. If you don't have a proper vision and a mission, right, it'll be a short-term kind of a thing. It'll be like when you open a soda bottle, it'll come out and then it'll subside. So this, I don't think I need to explain much. You need to have a vision. So when we did our songs, like if I give you why we did what we did, we had a problem. Back in the day, when we were young people, when we were teenagers, Sri Lanka had lost, up until 1985, Rukanta was the last person before us who really did something with a vision and a mission. So if you take from back in the day, if you take like Amadeva Master to Sunil Shanta to Victor Ratnayaka to Clarence Vijayawardena to all those musicians coming up to 1985, they had a clear vision of where they want to go. So you had your Sri Lankan more patriotic kind of music, or like, the Sri Lankan more kind of authentic music there. And then you had like the Sri Lankan global sound. So up until Rukanta, we had that balance. After that, we started losing it, and there was no identity that we had. And we were doing substandard global sounding products at one time. And when we were teenagers, we kind of realized this kind of the gap. And when we went for our own parties, DJs were not playing any Sri Lankan music there. They would play it at the end. Like, say, for example, Ipsis they used to play, because that was the only thing we had, because the Haila, up to Rukanta they played. That gap was not being filled. So our whole objective was, we wanted to fill that gap. So our objective was always to fill that gap. So then whatever we made sure that it was a user-friendly you know, thing that solved a need of a certain, person. Like if you take any sort of thing, a watch or a phone or whatever now, right? If it's not solving somebody's problem, it doesn't go for long. If you take a band like Jayashri, Jayashri wanted to do reggae, and then they brought that reggae identity in a big way to Sri Lanka. So people needed that single reggae or the Sri Lankan reggae to be there. So that lived on. And if you take a person like Henaka Hatagoda, his lyrics of his songs, it spoke of the issues that we have as humanity in our society. So those things stay on. So it's something like that.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Once again, that very comprehensive answer. I think this is what we love about you. You don't have a quick answers to them. You actually really do explain things properly, which is very handy sometimes. So I'd like to ask you another question about you got a friend who's thinking of a business. You probably had come across some of these people, and they are coming up with an idea that everyone else is already doing, and they're not very motivated by that. They don't feel like replicating what others are doing. What would you tell someone like that?
So basically, every business or every product or every idea anyway has a gap, because people feel a certain gap, but then there will be other gaps. So if you want to enter an existing business, you need to really find what that gap is and then enter into it. If not, you'll be entering straight into a tank of sharks, and where you'll have to really fight it out, or some stuff like that, because there are ample examples that you cannot come and be successful just because you have a lot of money. There are ample examples in the world. Big companies have tried to do something that a small company does, but they fail miserably. But people who find that gap, right? People who find that gap, people who identify the kind of mechanism of certain things, they really do well. So what I mean is, like, say for example, anybody entering any business, don't just look at the business from the surface of it. Say if you are coming to this industry, yes, first you are very interested in singing a song, doing music and doing that, yeah. But if you want to do it full time, do not enter into it before studying the entire mechanism of the industry. Because for you to do it full time, a perspective of a fan or a person who loves it is not enough, because there's a different mechanism, there's a different operation in it. You need to understand that entire, the way it happens, mechanics of that happens. Unless you understand the mechanics, you will fail. So you need to understand any business that you go in, you need to understand the business mechanics of how it operates, and then get into it. Because that's when you start seeing where the gaps are.
Thank you. So you did mention about being in the corporate world and being an employee in the past, and now what we're targeting from this program is to encourage the listeners out there, the viewers out there, to think about getting away from the traditional Monday to Friday 9 to 5 and thinking outside the box and coming out of your corporate role into starting up something that you have passion for. What advice could you give to someone like that?
Okay, my first advice would be, everybody is not a good entrepreneur, nor is everybody a good employee, right? First, you need to know if you're employee material or you're entrepreneur material, because now say for example, there are CEOs of massive companies, they're employees, but they're very successful in those businesses, as in massive blue chip companies run by people, corporate executives, but they're employees, they're not entrepreneurs. There have been so many of those people who are very successful as CEOs of bigger companies, come out and try to start their own thing, they fail miserably. Right? There are successful entrepreneurs, I don't think, that can go and work in a company. So you need to first find out which one are you, right? You need to first find out which one you are. Because just because you're a very successful CEO, that doesn't mean, or a GM or a good brand manager, that doesn't mean that you'll be a successful entrepreneur. Because entrepreneurship is a different thing. And being an employee is a different state of mind. So that is number one. Then the next one is, if you're an employee and you find that you have entrepreneurial skills, the first thing that you need to do is, can you stomach risk? Can you stomach risk? This, if you can't stomach risk, don't become an entrepreneur, because when you're an entrepreneur, you're constantly thinking, you're constantly under stress, you're constantly thinking, of the next 3 months. When you're an employee, yes, you do have targets, but okay, just because you fail, you won't be failing a lot of others. You'll be failing yourself, and the company will pick it up and go from there. But when you're an entrepreneur, if you fail, you're failing all your team, your employees. So as an entrepreneur, the main stress that I have is, like, when from 2020 to 2022, when we had COVID, main stress was, how am I going to take care of this extended family of ours, as in the employees and their family. So it's not only the 150 or 100 employees that you have, it's their families. So you're looking at, say, if you have 100 employees, you're looking at least 300 people who are dependent on you. So these are the kind of little things. And then, the products that you put out, those innovations, those investments, so there's a lot of stress, and you don't have off days, break days. It's a complete, non-stop thing which happens. So you need to identify which one you are. And the first thing is, can you stomach risk? If you can, you can get down to it.
Fantastic answer. Well, finally, I'm going to ask you, you would have received plenty of good advice in your life to go the journey, the distance you've traveled so far, considering all that. But I'm going to ask you, tell our viewers, what is the absolute best advice you've got in your life?
I think the best advice that I got was from my dad. And my father basically gave me this advice long time ago when I was just coming up in life. And that advice extends to all the other things that, all the other advices I've got from others. See, it was a very simple thing. So when, we had put one song and it started getting popular, he one day just said a very simple thing. He said, every day when you wake up, think that you need to work all over again to be the star that you are yesterday for tomorrow. As in, you were a star yesterday. Today you had to work all over again to become a star tomorrow. So if you think that, that particular stardom is something which expires on a daily basis, yes, you were a star yesterday, but you need to work all over again to become a star for tomorrow. So the day that you are now experiencing now, you're not a star. you are just doing a task. So that was one advice that has kept me grounded so far. And that was one advice again that has really helped me to, as I told you, to be in that place where you're not overly happy with people's comments, or you're not overly sad or overly angry with people's comments. That has helped me maintain my objectivity. So this is the best advice that I have got, and I think this can be applied to everybody out there, because this is what it takes to be focused on the task at hand, what you have to do now. So this, I think my father was very much, he was very much into Buddhism. So if I relate this to that, it's like, live in the moment, but don't bask in, don't try to live in the past or the future. So live in this moment.
Yeah. So, considering, I'm assuming this is an advice that was given a very long time ago.
Yeah, this was around 99.
Yeah, and that advice to our viewers out there is very much still applicable to today's world, and that's the beauty of that brilliant advice that you have got. So, Bathiya Jayakody, thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much for having me.
Thank you very much for joining Talk with Jay by UDAWWA. And we look forward to catching up with you again in some time during the future.
Thank you very much. I'll be back.
Absolutely. Thank you.